Good day. So in today's topic in research is the research design and methods. So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to define research design and research methods and utilize a research design appropriate to the purpose of your research. In the previous discussion, we have discussed about the general level of research, which is consisted of three steps. First, pose a question. It refers to the statement of the problem. Second, collect data to answer the question. It refers to the treatment. And lastly, present an answer to the question. It refers to the results and discussion. So let's differentiate research design and research method. So research design is the overall structure of the research. So it focuses on what type of study is planned and what kind of results are expected. For example, the statement of the problem is, or the problem is, what are the factors affecting the studies amidst pandemic? So it is a descriptive research. So the design is descriptive, and the results are expected to describe that event, that phenomena. So the results are expected to describe the factors that affects the study. Kaya siya descriptive. What if the problem is um, online distance learning using virtual simulation as a platform for learning science? Okay. Virtual simulation approach for learning science is our problem. So, it could be an action research or experimental, right? And the expected results are what is the effect of the intervention when learning science. That's why the research design depends on the problem, on the SOP. Meanwhile, research method are the procedures that will be used to collect and analyze data. For example, we use descriptive design. Then, most likely, the statistical tools to analyze the data are um, ANOVA, mean frequency percentage distribution, like that. And the methods for gathering data, the instrument is checklist, right? That is the common. For example, action research. Then the methods are intervention. Then siguro may interview din doon. Aside doon, may assessment. Right? So it focuses on what type of methods are more suitable to collect and analyze the evidence needed. And lastly, the research methods depends on the research design. Kaya nga kung descriptive yun, siguro ANOVA lang yung nun, statistical tool nun, and mean frequency percentage. Kung action research yun, siguro may interview yun, siguro may assessment test, siguro may intervention, siguro may yun, di ba? May t-test, di ba? To compare the post and pre-test, like that. That is research methods. So let us first consider the research aim and research approach. So let's consider the sample variable is online distance learning. And these are the differences between the qualitative approach and quantitative approach. So these two, qualitative and quantitative, are the general approaches in research. So may mga difference yan. And let's discuss it isa-isa. Now, we assume that online distance learning is the sample variable. So, The difference between the two: first, the qualitative approach understands subjective experiences, beliefs, and concepts. Meanwhile, quantitative approach measures variables and describe frequency, averages, and correlation. So the main difference between the two is that in qualitative, the expected answers were essays, diba? Statements, basta purely words. Meanwhile, in quantitative, it is purely numeric and ginagamitan ng statistical tools. So, yon ang pinaka-main difference nila. Now, in qualitative approach, it is subjective. Meanwhile, in quantitative, it should be objective. So, what is the difference between that? Subjectives depende sa kung anong gustong maging sagot nung participant o ng respondent. So, may personal bias in the respondent. Meanwhile, in objective, there is no personal bias sa answer ng participant. So, our variable is ODL. Now, in qualitative approach, for example, the problem is what are the challenges and coping mechanisms of the learners in studying amidst online distance learning approach. So yun, iba-iba yung experiences ng mga learners. Iba-iba sila ng mga challenges na naranasan, iba-iba sila ng coping mechanisms done during the ODL. Kaya may personal bias talaga doon, di ba? Sa kanilang answers. At talagang unique yun sa isa't isa. Meanwhile, in quantitative approach, dahil nga mostly checklist lang dito, di ba? O kaya exams, assessments, like that. So, for example, the problem is factors affecting the studying of the learners amidst ODL. Diba? So, i-check nila doon, is it teacher factor, environmental factor, diba? Monthly income ba yung isa sa mga profile na nakaka-affect, diba? Their working status, their gender, diba? So, yun, there is similarities in their responses. Like that. Kaya gagamitin nyo ng statistical tools. And that is objective kasi iisa lang yung sinasagutan nila. Yun. Next difference is in qualitative approach, we are gaining in-depth knowledge of a specific context or culture. So how do we gain in-depth knowledge? By asking follow-up questions, digging a more in-depth questions regarding the topic, yun, and exploring more questions exploring more details by asking them new questions based from their responses. Halimbawa, tinanong mo, what are the challenges that affects their studying? Then, sinabi nila yung kanilang work, di ba? Kasi nag-work sila. So, hindi nila nababudget yung time nila. So, tatanungin mo, bakit ka nag-work? Saan ka nag-work? Bakit importante, paano nakakaabala yung work mo sa iyong pag-aaral? Yun, you are gaining in-depth knowledge on that specific context. But in quantitative approach, it tests the hypothesis about relationships between the variables. For example, diba, factors affecting the studying amidst ODL. Now, i-check kung yung profile variable ba has significant difference, di ba? In the significant difference in these factors. For example, ang lumabas is that gender has significant difference in the working status, example, or the environment. Halimbawa, yung babae, mas nakatrabaho siya sa kahit anong klaseng learning environment. Yung lalaki, hindi. May specific lang siyang gustong lugar kung saan niya gusto mag-aral. For example, yung civil status, ligid naman sa kaalaman natin na yung iba is may asawa na during college, di ba? Yung iba naman ay single. Now, yung civil status ay nakaka-affect, di ba? Sa kanilang pag-aaral, siguro dahil may distraction. O kaya naman, itong profile niya ay nakaka-apekto rin. Di ba? May significant difference sa teacher factor. So, yun. O kaya naman, these all factors, teacher, environmental factor, personal factor, they have relationship on each other, kaya pwede silang i-correlate. So, it tests the hypothesis. So, ano ba yung hypothesis like this? Is there a significant difference in the factors affecting studying when grouped according to profile variables? O kaya, is there significant relationships in between the factors affecting studying? So, yun. Lastly, in qualitative approach, explores under-researched problems and generate new ideas. Meanwhile, in quantitative, test the effectiveness of new treatment, program, product, or concepts, or others. So, yun. Sa qualitative kasi, talaga mag-explore dyan ng bago kasi nga iba-iba, unique yung answers. And pwede ka maka-generate ng bago dyan by doing follow-up questions. Diba? Kaya kung exploratory, diba, wala pang literature or dating studies etong intended study mo. For example, wala pang dating studies tong online distance learning. Then based from the interviews, the responses of each participants, diba, pwede kang makagain ng bagong knowledge. Diba? Kaya kapag new yung topic, pag bagong-bago yung topic at wala siyang related lit, walang related studies, hindi pwedeng mag-quantitative doon hanggat maaari. Kasi wala namang basis. Kaya dito, sa quantitative, it tests, di ba, the effectiveness, or it tests the concepts, like that. So, dito, sa quantitative, dapat may dati ng related studies na pagbabasihan o kung saan mag-a-anchor yung study. So, choose a research design kung qualitative or quantitative. For example, these are the questions. What are the challenges that you have experienced amidst ODL in terms of economic and instruction? So, that is a qualitative question. Diba? How do you cope up with those experiences? That is also qualitative. Quantitative naman, ganito naman yung type na questions, diba? What are the factors affecting the studies of science students amidst ODL? O kaya naman, is there a significant relationship between internet speed and quiz scores? So, ano yung data nila dito? Yung internet speed, diba? At yung quiz score. So, that is quantitative. So, these are the types of designs in the quantitative approach. We have experimental, quasi-experimental, descriptive and correlational. Meanwhile, in qualitative, we have case study, ethnography, grounded theory, and phenomenology. So before we proceed to the different research designs, we must first understand what is causal and correlational relationships. So correlation means that there is a statistical association between the variables, meaning that there are relationships between the variables, either positive correlation, negative correlation. For example, kapag tumaas yung demand, bababa yung supply. So there is an inverse relationship. Pag tumaas naman ang supply, it's either, pag masyadong marami yung supply, it's either mababa yung demand. That is the most common known relationships. For example, mataas yung math mo, pwedeng mataas din yung physics mo. Diba? O kaya, mataas yung math mo, pero mababa yung physics mo. So, mataas yung math mo, pero mababa yung English mo. Diba? So, correlation ang tawag doon. Sa causation naman, yung isang variable, kapag nagbago sa isang variable, pwedeng may mabago rin sa another variable. For example, mataas yung bilihin ng soft drinks, diba? Tumaas yung presyo ng soft drinks, tapos tumaas din yung presyo ng yelo. Yes, may relationship sa kanila kasi nung tumaas yung presyo ng soft drinks, tumaas din yung yelo. Bakit? Kasi mainit, 'di ba? Ang causation doon dahil mainit, kaya tumaas yung presyo ng dalawa. Ayun yung naging epekto. Now, let's try to understand it further. So, our sample variables are the scores in physics and araling panlipunan. So, in here, pinakita dito that the scores in araling panlipunan ay mataas, 'di ba? And the scores in physics are also high. So, parehas na mataas yung scores in araling panlipunan at sa physics. So, nung chinek yung correlation nila, that there is a significant correlation. Na, kasi sabi, siguro, nung tumaas yung grade sa AP, tumataas din yung grade sa physics. Yun, may positive correlation sila sa isa't isa. But then, in causation, bakit nga ba tumaas yung grades sa AP at physics? So, ano yung cause at ano yung naging effect? So, ang cause, dahil studious, di ba? Yung estudyante, masipag mag-aral yung estudyante in araling panlipunan and in physics. So, ang cause is ang pagiging studious. And the effect is parehas na mataas yung scores in araling panlipunan and in physics. That is causation. So, the cause is being studious. The effect is both grades in both subjects are high. That is causation. So, let's discuss first about the experimental design. So, it is used to test causal relationships, involves manipulating an independent variable and measuring its effect on a dependent variable. Diba? Subjects are randomly assigned to groups and usually conducted in a controlled environment. So, ang environment here should be controlled. So, all of them should experience the same setting. Diba? Like, dapat nasa klase sila. Walang external influence na dapat maka-influence dun sa pagtaas ng scores nila aside dun sa pedagogy na ginamit or intervention na ginamit lang ni teacher. So, si teacher ay nagtuturo ng tatlong klase. So, class A, class B, at class C. So, during in his experiment, sa class A, modular lang ang ginamit niya. Sa class B, online discussion ang ginamit niya. At sa class C, virtual simulation ang ginamit niya. Nung una, nagbigay siya ng pre-assessment test. Pre-test. Okay. Yung pre-test, binigay niya yon sa tatlong sections. Pare-parehas yung pre-test. Then after nila mag-pre-test, ginamit niya na itong mga interventions, which is modular, online discussion, and virtual simulation. Then after nun, saka siya nag-post test. Ngayon, chinek kung may difference ba yung pre-test and post-test ng Class A, Class B, at Class C. Chinek kung effective ba yung intervention. Diba? Ayun yung tinatawag nating experimental. So, next is quasi-experimental. First, used to test causal relationships. Next, similar to experimental designs but without random assignment kasi tinakda ni teacher kung anong grupo talaga sila dapat makagrupo. Yung Class A, control group yun, at yung Class B, experimental group yun. Next, often involves comparing the outcomes of pre-existing groups. Ang pre-existing groups natin dito is the control group kasi ang intervention nila ay online discussion. So, yung online discussion, kumbaga, dati na siyang ginagamit. Ay, ito yung commonly na ginagamit na pedagogy ng mga teachers sa kanilang klase online discussion. Diba? Kaya control group yan. Pre-existing na yan. Meaning, nag-exist na yung intervention na yan bago lumabas tong virtual simulation. Next, often conducted in natural environment. So, as you could see here, we have two groups, the control and experimental. Yung control group, yung Class A, pre-existing yung intervention na ginamit sa kanya. Kumbaga, ito na yung dating ginagamit, the online discussion. Meanwhile, sa Class B naman, this is the experimental group and virtual simulation. Ito yung intervention na i-experiment natin. Okay, kasi bago lang, hindi to commonly na ginagamit noon. Okay. Ayan yung experimental group natin. Now, parehas silang bibigyan ng pre-test. Parehas na gagawin yung intervention, which is the online discussion and virtual simulation. At parehas silang bibigyan ng post-test. Ngayon, titignan kung sino ang mas mataas. The control group na ang kinamit ay yung common na online discussion or the experimental group na ang ginamit ay yung virtual simulation. So, i-check yung significant difference nung dalawa. Kung effective ba yung intervention sa experimental group. Kasi kung effective, pwede siyang i-recommend. So, that is quasi-experimental design. So, next is correlational. So, na-discuss na natin to kanina. So, we have here examples. The indication of correlation is high correlation, moderately high correlation, moderate correlation, low correlation, and negligible correlation. So, parang ganito rin siya sa GIF. Kapag tumaas yung isa, bababa yung isa. Or instead, pag tumaas yung isa, tataas din yung isang variable. Yung directly proportional and inversely proportional relationships, parang supply and demand nga. So, for example, here in physics, math, English, and Filipino. So, makikita nyo dito, nung tumaas yung physics, tumaas din yung math. But then, nung mataas yung logical, mathematical subjects nila, mababa naman yung linguistic subjects. Yung English and Filipino. So, ganun, meron silang low correlation. Next is descriptive. So, used to describe characteristics, averages, trends, etc. Variables are measured without influencing them. So, in this descriptive, dinidescribe yung sitwasyon, yung tao, yung mga variables, the relationships to each other, are they affecting each other? So, yun yung purpose ng descriptives. So, ang sample problems here is like knowledge and attitudes of education students towards vaccination. Dinidescribe yung kaalaman at yung attitudes ng mga estudyante sa pagbabakuna. Diba? Next, sa pangalawa naman is dinidescribe yung awareness ng mga Gen Z sa mga pandemic-related laws. Diba? Next naman, dinidescribe naman dito yung perception ng mga Manilenyos sa response program at recovery strategies ng LGU Manila during the pandemic. So, yun yung descriptive. Next is dumako naman tayo sa Qualitative Designs. First is case study. So, it is a detailed study of a specific subject, place, event, organization. Data can be collected using a variety of sources and methods. And lastly, it focuses on gaining a holistic understanding of the case. So, we have here sample of case study of mathematics teachers learning in an online study group. So, ang ginawa dito, there are two teachers and uma-attend ng online study group to learn. Diba? Now, they were interviewed and observed. Tinanong sila, nagkaroon ng in-depth interview about how they learn, what they learn, diba? And what to do with their learnings. Diba? At marami pang iba. So, and also, inobserve sila doon sa mga ginagawa nila in the environment, how they adapt on the debates, online debates, how they analyze, diba? How they acquire knowledge, how they participated in that online study group. So, that is case study. You are observing, interviewing a certain person or group, diba? Or community or event. Next design is ethnography. So, it is a detailed study of the culture of a specific community or group. So, data is collected by extended immersion and close observation. It focuses on describing and interpreting beliefs, conventions, social dynamics. For example, this studies about the ethnographic knowledge on fishing. Diba? Siyempre, ang respondents mo dito are mga fishermen. Diba? Mga fishermen. So, kung sa ethnographic study, the researcher should live with them. I-observe niya kung paano ba nangingisda yung mga fisherman, paano ba sila pumapalaot, ano bang ginagawa nila kapag nag-i-stay sila sa dagat, ano bang ginagawa nila kapag marami silang huli o wala silang huli, o ano bang ginagawa nila para makahuli sila ng marami. Or ino-observe niya rin or tinatanong niya kung saan, paano nalalaman yung magagandang spot sa panghuhuli. Diba? Ano yung mga yon? Depende sa depende doon sa study niya, yung mga itatanong niya. Pero ang pinaka-gist dito is that the data is collected, diba, by extended immersion and close observation. The researcher immerse him or herself to the culture of his or her participants. And i-observe niya yon personally and closely. That is ethnography. For example, may study ka about culture of IP, di mamumuhay ka sa kanila. Then i-observe mo kung ano yung ginagawa nila. Diba? Day and night. Kasi culture nga eh. Diba? For example, yung mga sugar cane, di mamuhay ka sa kanila, then i-observe mo kung paano sila anong ginagawa nila sa sugar cane, sa pagtapas ng sugar cane. Diba? So that is ethnographic studies. You are immersing yourself with those people and do close observation. Next is dumako naman tayo sa Qualitative Designs. First is case study. So, it is a detailed study of a specific subject, place, event, organization. Data can be collected using a variety of sources and methods. And lastly, it focuses on gaining a holistic understanding of the case. So, we have here sample of case study of mathematics teachers learning in an online study group. So, ang ginawa dito, there are two teachers and uma-attend ng online study group to learn. Di ba? Now, they were interviewed and observed. At tinanong sila, nagkaroon ng in-depth interview about how they learn, what they learn, di ba? And what to do with their learnings. Di ba? At marami pang iba. So, and also, inobserve sila doon sa mga ginagawa nila in the environment, how they adapt on the debates, online debates, how they analyze, di ba? How they acquire knowledge, how they participated in that online study group. So that is case study. You are observing, interviewing a certain person or group, di ba? Or community or event. Next is grounded theory. So I am not much familiar with this, but it says that it aims to develop a theory inductively by systematically analyzing qualitative data. So our problem here, for example, is the challenges and opportunities of limited face-to-face classes. So napakaunti pa lamang naman ng nagli-limited face-to-face, and ang primary na nakakaranas ng mga challenges and opportunities here are the teachers na nakapagturo na in the limited face-to-face. Now, wala pang theories, literatures, studies to back up this this study. Kaya ang mangyayari dito, all of the inputs, all of the data ay manggagaling sa pinakababa, sa grassroots, 'di ba? Manggagaling doon sa person involved. So kung ano yung ibigay nilang input, yun yung i-analyze to make a hypothesis, to make another knowledge, 'di ba? Yeah. Kung ano yung inputs na ibinigay nila, yun yung magiging inputs to make a new concept, diba? A new philosophy or principle. So, yun. Inductive siya. Diba? From specific details, from many specific details, it was analyzed to form a larger and broader concept. That is grounded theory. Next design is ethnography. So, it is a detailed study of the culture of a specific community or group. So, data is collected by extended immersion and close observation. It focuses on describing and interpreting beliefs, conventions, social dynamics. For example, this studies about the ethnographic knowledge on fishing. Diba? Siyempre, ang respondents mo dito are mga fishermen. Diba? Mga fishermen. So, kung sa ethnographic study, the researcher should live with them. I-observe niya kung paano ba nangingisda yung mga fishermen, paano ba sila pumapalaot, ano bang ginagawa nila kapag nag-i-stay sila sa dagat, ano bang ginagawa nila kapag marami silang huli o wala silang huli, o ano bang ginagawa nila para makahuli sila ng marami. Or ino-observe niya rin or tinatanong niya kung saan, paano nalalaman yung magagandang spot sa panghuhuli. Diba? Ano yung mga yon? Depende sa depende doon sa study niya, yung mga itatanong niya. Pero ang pinaka-gist dito is that the data is collected, di ba, by extended immersion and close observation. The researcher immerse him or herself to the culture of his or her participants. And i-observe niya yon personally and closely. That is ethnography. For example, may study ka about culture of IP, di mamumuhay ka sa kanila. Then i-observe mo kung ano yung ginagawa nila. Di ba? Day and night. Kasi culture nga eh. Di ba? For example, yung mga sugar cane, di mamuhay ka sa kanila, then i-observe mo kung paano sila anong ginagawa nila sa sugar cane, sa pagtapas ng sugar cane, 'di ba? So that is ethnographic studies. You are immersing yourself with those people and do close observation. Lastly is the phenomenological studies. So phenomenon. Okay? So it aims to understand a phenomenon or event by describing participants' lived experiences. So, ang problem natin, for example, is lived experiences of teachers teaching in remote areas in Zambales. Now, you will ask, as a researcher, you will ask your participants what he or she experienced in the remote areas, teaching in the remote areas in Zambales. So it's all about his or her experiences. Okay, that is phenomenology. Ito yung talagang makatotohanang ginagawa nila sa pang-araw-araw. Hindi siya simple na nag-interview based on his perception, but the real, di ba? Experiences. Real na talagang nangyayari. Tunay na nangyayari sa buhay nila. That is phenomenological. Next design is ethnography. So, it is a detailed study of the culture of a specific community or group. So, data is collected by extended immersion and close observation. It focuses on describing and interpreting beliefs, conventions, social dynamics. For example, this studies about the ethnographic knowledge on fishing. Diba? Siyempre, ang respondents mo dito are mga fishermen. Diba? Mga fishermen. So, kung sa ethnographic study, the researcher should live with them. I-observe niya kung paano ba nangingisda yung mga fisherman, paano ba sila pumapalaot, ano bang ginagawa nila kapag nag-i-stay sila sa dagat, ano bang ginagawa nila kapag marami silang huli o wala silang huli, o ano bang ginagawa nila para makahuli sila ng marami. Or ino-observe niya rin or tinatanong niya kung saan, paano nalalaman yung magagandang spot sa panghuhuli. Diba? Ano yung mga yon? Depende sa depende doon sa study niya, yung mga itatanong niya. Pero ang pinaka-gist dito is that the data is collected, diba, by extended immersion and close observation. The researcher immerse him or herself to the culture of his or her participants. And i-observe niya yon personally and closely. That is ethnography. For example, may study ka about culture of IP, di mamumuhay ka sa kanila. Then i-observe mo kung ano yung ginagawa nila. Di ba? Day and night. Kasi culture nga eh. Di ba? For example, yung mga sugar cane, di mamuhay ka sa kanila, and i-observe mo kung paano sila anong ginagawa nila sa sugar cane, sa pagtapas ng sugar cane. Diba? So that is ethnographic studies. You are immersing yourself with those people and do close observation. Next is dumako naman tayo sa Qualitative Designs. First is case study. So it is a detailed study of a specific subject, place, event, organization. Data can be collected using a variety of sources and methods. And lastly, it focuses on gaining a holistic understanding of the case. So we have here sample of case study of mathematics teachers learning in an online study group. So, ang ginawa dito, there are two teachers and uma-attend ng online study group to learn, di ba? Now, they were interviewed and observed. At tinanong sila, nagkaroon ng in-depth interview about how they learn, what they learn, di ba? And what to do with their learnings. Di ba? At marami pang iba. So, and also, inobserve sila doon sa mga ginagawa nila in the environment, how they adapt on the debates, online debates, how they analyze, di ba? How they acquire knowledge, how they participated in that online study group. So that is case study. You are observing, interviewing a certain person or group, di ba? Or community or event. So, we need to identify the population and the sampling method. So, a population is the entire group that you want to draw conclusions about. Next is the sample is the specific group that you will collect data from. The size of the sample is always less than the total size of the population. So, for example, the entire population of a certain university, for example, UP, you will get the perceptions of UP students towards vaccination, for example. Then, you will get only 50 samples per college. So, yun yung pinakaiba. The population is the entire, diba? Entire group where you will draw the conclusion. But the sample is just a part of that population. Diba? So, yun yung sample. For example, ang gusto mong respondents are the Central Luzon Science teacher, but then ang kinuhanan mo lang is Tarlac and Zambales. Ganun. O kaya, whole population of science teachers from Central Luzon, pero kumuha ka lang ng 50 teachers from Zambales, Tarlac, Aurora, Bulacan, Pampanga, Bataan. Like that. That is sample. Choose your data collection methods. So, data collection methods are ways of directly measuring variables and gathering information. So, mayroong iba't ibang data collection methods. We have survey, we have observation, standardized tests, diba? Interviews, life history records, diba? Yun yung tinatawag nating data collection methods. Marami pa aside dyan. As a researcher, you should also decide on your data analysis strategies. So, in quantitative, we do descriptive or inferential statistics. Meanwhile, in qualitative, we do thematic analysis or discourse analysis. So, madidiscuss yan in previous, in next topics. So, these are the differences between the data of quantitative and qualitative approach. So, let's first tackle about ice cream. So, in quantitative, 20% of survey respondents bought ice cream today. The average amount spent on ice cream by 500 respondents was $5. In qualitative, the data is like this. I bought the ice cream because I saw it when I was in the checkout line. I wanted to treat myself. That is the qualitative data. So, punta naman tayo sa pizza. In quantitative data, ganito ang itsura niya. 50% of the people in New York strongly enjoy pizza. Meanwhile, in qualitative, I like a lot of toppings on my pizza, cheese, sauce, pepperoni, and olives. So, lastly, in grocery, di ba? On average, respondents rate their grocery stores a 3.5 out of 5. Meanwhile, in qualitative, Diba? The grocery store has a good options in general, but the lines can be long and they are often out of stock of many of my favorite brands. So, here you can see the great difference, diba, of the quantitative and qualitative data based from their appearances and how they were presented and discussed. These are the references of this presentation. So I wanted to acknowledge Miss Carmel Casuga as she prepared this slide presentation. So I hope you learned about the research, design, and method. So if you have questions, you may post it in the comment sections. Thank you.